What if the very system built to support you after service suddenly turned around and said, "You owe us thousands"? Sounds unthinkable, right? But for a growing number of veterans, it's exactly what's happening. One day, you get a letter from the VA. It looks official, harmless even. Then you open it and discover they claim they've been overpaying you for months, sometimes years. Now they want it all back, with interest and no warning. This isn't about fraud. These are honest veterans, many disabled, many struggling, who followed the rules. They applied for benefits, trusted the process, and used the money in good faith, only to later be hit with crushing debt notices. Some owe $5,000. Others, over $100,000. And the worst part? Most of them had no idea anything was wrong until it was too late. How is this even possible? How does someone get overpaid by the federal government without realizing it, and then punished for the government's mistake? In this video, we're going to break it all down. You'll learn why these overpayments happen, the hidden triggers that can set them off, and the harsh consequences that blindside veterans who thought they were safe. If you've ever received VA benefits or know someone who has, this is something you absolutely need to hear, because the truth is, what happened to them could happen to you. And once the debt letter arrives, your life can change fast. Stick with me, because the details might shock you, and knowing what to do now could save you a world of trouble later. It usually starts with a simple update, one that feels routine and harmless. A veteran moves to a new address, gets married, changes jobs, or starts collecting Social Security. They report the change like they're supposed to. Or sometimes they don't even realize they need to, because the VA system never made it clear. Months pass, maybe years. Life goes on. Then, out of nowhere, a debt letter arrives. Cold, formal, demanding thousands of dollars back for overpayments. Here's the problem. The VA system is notoriously outdated and slow. It often fails to catch changes in real time. So while a veteran's circumstances may have changed, the payment amounts don't adjust right away, or at all. That delay, it silently racks up debt. And because many veterans assume the VA is handling things properly, they never question the monthly deposits. Why would they? It's not like they're hiding anything. The money just keeps coming, until it doesn't. One common trigger? Dual compensation. A veteran starts receiving VA disability payments, then begins collecting retirement pay or unemployment without realizing there's a conflict. The systems don't talk to each other fast enough. By the time someone finally reviews the account, the government decides there's been an overpayment, even though the veteran did nothing wrong. What makes this worse is a lack of warning. There's no alert, no phone call, no red flag that says, "Hey, we're overpaying you. Here's how to fix it." Instead, everything seems fine until that letter lands in the mailbox like a hammer. And by then, the debt is often in the thousands. This is where confusion turns into panic. Because to the VA, this is just a numbers issue. But to a veteran, it feels like betrayal. What most people don't realize is how easy it is to fall into this trap, and how hard it is to get out. When the VA decides you've been overpaid, they don't ask questions first. They send the bill, and if you can't pay it back right away, they start taking it straight out of your benefits. That means your monthly check, money you rely on for rent, food, medicine, suddenly shrinks, sometimes by hundreds of dollars. And the worst part? You may not even understand why. Imagine waking up one day and seeing your payment cut by 25%, with no warning except a cold letter saying you owe $12,000. That's what happened to Marcus, a former Marine who moved across state lines and didn't realize his dependent status needed to be updated again. The VA kept sending him payments as if nothing changed, until 2 years later, when they demanded the money back. He was stunned. He'd done everything by the book, or so he thought. The appeals process? It's slow, confusing, and filled with technicalities. Veterans are often told they can request a waiver, but those waivers are rarely granted unless you can prove both financial hardship and that the overpayment wasn't your fault. And even then, success is far from guaranteed. Many give up, thinking they'll never win against the system. This isn't just about money. It's about dignity, about feeling punished for something you didn't even know was wrong. And every time it happens, It chips away at the trust veterans once had in a system that promised to support them. But the bigger question still lingers. How did this problem get so out of control? The answer lies deeper in the next section. It starts with the system itself. The VA is massive, complex, overloaded, and riddled with outdated technology. Decisions that affect people's lives are sometimes made by automated processes, and human error is more common than anyone wants to admit. Overpayments often begin with something as small as a delay in paperwork. A veteran moves, changes jobs, or their dependent status shifts. They report it or think they did, but the system doesn't update in time. Meanwhile, payments keep coming as if nothing's changed. The VA calls these administrative errors, but the impact isn't administrative, it's personal. Once the mistake is discovered, it's a veteran who's held responsible. There's no grace period, no real investigation into who made the mistake, just a debt notice and the expectation that you'll pay it back immediately. What's worse is that these errors can take years to surface. One vet reported being told he was overpaid for a housing allowance 5 years earlier, money long spent on rent and groceries. No fraud, no dishonesty, just a bureaucratic delay. But when the VA wants their money back, they don't care how long ago it happened. They take it anyway. And because these issues aren't widely known, most veterans never see it coming. It's not something they warn you about in transition classes. It's not something most VSO reps talk about in detail. Until it hits your wallet, you assume everything's fine. But by then, you're stuck trying to prove you're innocent in a system that assumes you're not. This isn't a glitch. It's a pattern. And the consequences don't stop at your bank account. What comes next can affect your entire financial future. The financial fallout from a VA overpayment can hit hard, and it hits fast. Once a VA decides you owe them money, they don't wait for your approval to collect. They begin by sending a debt notice. But if you don't respond quickly or they decide your response isn't good enough, they'll start pulling money directly from your monthly compensation. No warning. No appeal process that pauses a collection. Just a sudden drop in your check. And in many cases, it's hundreds of dollars less than what you're used to. For veterans living on a fixed income, that's not just inconvenient. It's devastating. Bills go unpaid. Rent becomes a question mark. Groceries, gas, medical needs, all of it is suddenly uncertain. Some veterans have even faced homelessness after their compensation was garnished to repay a debt they didn't know they had. And because the VA is both the one claiming the debt and the one collecting it, there's no neutral third party reviewing whether the action is fair. You're stuck in a loop, arguing with the same agency that created the problem in the first place. To make things worse, repayment plans are notoriously rigid. You can ask for a waiver or appeal the debt, but those processes are slow and often denied. And during that waiting period, collections don't stop. Your pay continues to be reduced. In extreme cases, the VA has even referred debts to the Treasury Department, which can garnish tax returns or Social Security benefits. This isn't just a financial burden. It's a mental and emotional one, too. Veterans who have already faced trauma, instability, or long waits for care are now being penalized for something they didn't cause. It creates fear, distrust, and a feeling of betrayal by the very system meant to support them. But the real twist? Some of these overpayments could have been prevented entirely. If only the system worked the way it's supposed to. Many veterans assume that if the VA overpaid them, it must be their fault. Maybe they forgot to report a change. Maybe they missed a form. Maybe they didn't understand the system well enough. But here's what most people don't realize. In many cases, the overpayment wasn't caused by the veteran. It was caused by the VA itself. The VA has a history of processing delays, communication breakdowns, and internal errors that directly lead to these overpayments. For example, a veteran might report change in marital status or dependence, only for the VA to take months or even years to process the update. During that time, the veteran keeps receiving benefits at the old rate, not knowing that the VA is counting every extra dollar as a future debt. Or take the case of veterans who begin working while receiving individual unemployability benefits. They report the change immediately, thinking they're doing the right thing. But the VA doesn't adjust the benefits in time. And by the time they do, it looks like the veteran has been hiding their income. Suddenly, a retroactive debt appears. sometimes stretching back years, and the veteran is left to repay money they never intended to take. And it's not just a handful of cases. A government watchdog report revealed that the VA had failed to notify over 200,000 veterans about debt collections tied to overpayments, many of which were rooted in agency missteps, not fraud or deception. The system is slow, outdated, and unforgiving. It treats every error as if it were the veteran's fault, even when the paperwork shows otherwise. The real injustice is that veterans are punished for trusting the system. They followed the rules. They submitted the forms. They gave the VA the benefit of the doubt. But instead of support, they got silence. Then suddenly, years later, they're told they owe thousands. Not because they cheated, but because someone behind a desk didn't process their file in time. And now, they're the ones paying the price. What happens next is perhaps the most heartbreaking part, because it reveals just how much power the VA has once an overpayment is discovered. Veterans who serve their country with honor suddenly find themselves treated like debtors, with almost no room to explain or push back once the VA flags an overpayment. The response is swift and cold. Repayment demands, benefit garnishments, and sometimes even threats of legal action. Most veterans aren't prepared for how aggressive this process can be. Imagine opening your mailbox and finding a letter from the VA saying you owe $12,000. No warning, no phone call, just a demand for money. Most people simply don't have lying around. And if you don't respond fast enough or don't understand confusing language in the letter, your benefits can be reduced automatically until the full amount is recovered. Some veterans have seen their monthly disability checks slashed by hundreds of dollars overnight, with little explanation and no real opportunity to dispute it. For those living on fixed incomes, this can mean missed rent, skipped meals, and rising anxiety. And the appeals process? It's slow, technical, and often stacked against a veteran. You're expected to prove you didn't receive money you weren't entitled to, often years after the fact, when the error was the VA's to begin with. What's worse is that some veterans don't even know they were overpaid until it's too late. The VA's notification system is inconsistent. Letters get sent to outdated addresses. Calls go unanswered. And when the debt hits collections, the emotional toll is immense. Veterans report feeling betrayed, ashamed, and powerless, like they've been cast aside by the very agency meant to protect them. The real issue isn't just the overpayment. It's the way it's handled, with no grace, no empathy, and no acknowledgement that the system itself created the problem. Veterans aren't just punished financially, they're punished emotionally, too. And for many, that hurt cuts deeper than any number on a debt letter. There's one final twist of this story that most people never hear about, because it's buried in paperwork, obscure by legal language, and rarely explained in plain terms. It's the waiver process. In theory, veterans can request a waiver to avoid repaying an overpayment if they can prove two things: that the overpayment wasn't their fault, and that paying it back would cause financial hardship. Sounds reasonable, right? But in reality, this process is complicated, intimidating, and often stacked with vague requirements that leave veterans feeling helpless. Many veterans never even realize they have a right to request a waiver. The letters they receive from the VA don't make it easy to understand. There's no clear checklist, no personal guidance, just forms with dense language and strict deadlines. Miss one step, one box, one line, and your request can be denied before it's even considered. And even when a waiver is submitted correctly, approval is far from guaranteed. Veterans have to prove they didn't know the payments were incorrect and that they didn't cause a mistake. But how do you prove what you didn't know? Some are asked to provide old bank records, written explanations, even proof of phone calls. Anything to convince the VA they weren't trying to cheat the system. It's a grueling process that feels less like asking for fairness and more like being on trial. Then comes the hardship test. Veterans must show that repaying the money would cause significant financial harm. But what qualifies as hardship isn't clearly defined. Is skipping meals enough? Falling behind on rent? Choosing between medicine and utilities? Some waivers are denied even when veterans are clearly struggling, simply because the decision makers believe they could adjust their budget. For older veterans, especially those living alone or without legal help, the process is nearly impossible to navigate. Many give up before they even begin, afraid of the paperwork, the deadlines, and the emotional weight of having to plead for understanding. And that's what makes this final step so tragic. The waiver system was designed to provide mercy, but for many, it ends up delivering more confusion, more rejection, and more loss. If you're a veteran or know someone who's facing an overpayment issue, this is the part that matters most. Don't ignore the letter. Don't assume you have no options. And don't wait until it's too late. The VA may be powerful, but you have a voice. And understanding this step could make the difference between rebuilding your life and being buried under a debt you didn't deserve. It's hard to imagine that being overpaid could ruin someone's life. But for too many veterans, that's exactly what's happening. Not because they were greedy, not because they lied, but because the system designed to serve them is making mistakes behind the scenes, then turning around and punishing them for it. And what's worse, most of them never saw it coming. They trusted that the letters they received were accurate. They assumed the VA knew what it was doing. They didn't question the extra dollars in their checks because they had no reason to. But the price of that trust? Months, sometimes years of anxiety, debt, and damage that's incredibly hard to undo. If you've made it to the end of this video, then you understand just how important it is to stay informed, ask questions, and never assume the system is flawless. Veterans deserve clarity, not confusion. Support, not suspicion. And dignity, not debt collection letters. Whether you're a veteran yourself or someone who loves one, don't let this warning pass you by. Review your benefit statements. Question sudden changes in payment. If you ever receive an overpayment notice, respond immediately, because silence is treated as agreement. And if you're facing repayment and overwhelmed by it all, know that you are not alone. You have the right to ask questions, to appeal, and to request a waiver. And if something doesn't feel fair, it probably isn't. These are not just technical errors. They're life-altering decisions that affect real people who gave everything to serve this country. The least they deserve in return is transparency and a chance to defend themselves without being buried in red tape. So before you move on with your day, take a moment to think about the veterans in your life. Forward this video. Start the conversation. Because the truth is, this problem is more common than anyone realizes, and staying silent only helps it continue. If you learned something new today or have your own experience with VA overpayments, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Your voice could be the one that helps someone else avoid a devastating mistake. And if you found this video valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us keep creating content that informs, protects, and empowers people who deserve better. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.